A series of House of the Dragon spy photos were released this week. I don't like to do reviews of non-sanctioned photos because they are usually grainy and out of context, but these were high-quality photos apparently taken by a drone while the House of the Dragon cast and crew were shooting an exterior scene in Cornwall, England. If you don't want to see the pictures and want to be fully surprised when the show is released in 2022, or at least wait until we get some of the HBO still images, then please don't watch this video. I will be having more videos coming to the channel if you want to hang in there until then. My friend Asun first brought to my attention the pictures on social media of young Laenor Velaryon and Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, played by Millie Alcock. I did a post on both Twitter and my channel asking for everyone's opinion, and I was surprised to see how many of the comments were pretty negative. While some of the posts liked the costumes and the bright colors, the most common complaint from the majority of the posts were the wigs. So let's start there. As someone who has studied and worked in theater, wigs are very hard and specialized. This is often a struggle for both historical and fantasy shows. Even if the costumes are extraordinary, they can break a look. This is why having a competent team of creators, followed by camera tests, are so important. I don't know if you recall when Netflix released camera tests of Henry Cavill as The Witcher. Twitter blew up in reaction, which was an awesome opportunity for the show to tweak his hair, makeup, and costume. I often refer back to Game of Thrones as the benchmark. Don't get me wrong, there were some really bad wigs in the show. Marjorie's wig, for instance, often looked unnatural. Cersei had that one lopsided braided do in the Baelor episode, and Sansa Stark had to wear a wig in seasons 7 and 8 when, after repeated coloring, actor Sophie Turner's hair was damaged, so the wig was sitting a little high on the head. And of course, who could forget Rhaenyra Targaryen's dreadful wig in season 7? But for the most part, the wigs, designed by Kevin Alexander, looked natural. Dany's wigs and those worn by Mel, Marjorie, and Cersei were around $7,000 each because they were hand-knotted from color-treated human hair. Now, in House of the Dragon, there are a lot of wigs, far more than we ever saw on Game of Thrones because there were only 3 Targaryens on that show, the main cast that had to wear a wig, and the occasional bit character like Lady Crane or Gilly. The rest of the cast wore their own hair. In a previous video, we looked at the costumes and wigs worn by Matt Smith, Emma Darcy, and Stephen Toussaint. They look pretty good from what I can tell from the images. But here, the wigs, they just look bad. A few things are going on, I think. First of all, someone decided that Laenor should have silver locks in the first place. The character, played by actor Theo is the only son of Lord Corlys Velaryon and Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. Someone got it into their head that Laenor had to have Corlys' locks. But his mother is Targaryen, so they didn't have to go this way. Added to that, the wig itself is dreadfully bad. It's an awkward length. I suppose they were trying to match Daemon's shoulder-length hair, and it sits very high on his head. Because the actor has short hair, the only explanation is that they intentionally built it too high, and as many have commented, it looks like a rag mop. I think they should have just dyed his natural hair white and called it a day. Young Rhaenyra's wig isn't as problematic, but it is styled with a center part, and that is always going to give away a wig because the scalp will look unnatural. The wig worn by Emma Darcy as an older version of Rhaenyra looks more natural because it is an upswept style that covers the scalp and hides many sins. And because they have chosen to go with a straight style instead of waves, the wig sits a bit higher because of the actor's hair that, despite using pin curls and a cap, will add some volume underneath. It also looks synthetic to me, but that might be just because of the lighting, so we'll just have to wait and see for some more close-up shots. Tell me in the comment section below what you think of the wigs. Now let's look at the costumes. As I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of comments that they liked the costumes and they appreciate the use of color, something that was lacking in the latter seasons of Game of Thrones. If any of you have watched my coverage of Game of Thrones, you will know that I wasn't on board with the shutting down of color in the final seasons, and I wanted to see the house colors on display in their full glory. So we are getting a version of that here. And before I go on, the one thing that I have appreciated so far is all of the jewelry. This was on my wish list for the show, so this is something that I'm really happy to see here. Now, as far as Laenor's outfit is concerned, it's not that bad, but at the same time, it's nothing to write home about. It's just pretty basic, a Gambeson jacket, trousers, and boots. The Gambeson is typically a foundation garment worn under armor, although it could be worn alone as well. We saw that with Jaime Lannister, who often wore his asymmetrical leather Gambeson to court when he wasn't on official duty as a Kingsguard. This one looks like it's made out of linen or canvas, although I suppose it might be leather, and it's padded or quilted like a Gambeson should be, and it has detachable laced-on sleeves. After looking at another behind-the-scenes picture, it looks like it's bound in leather in a contrasting blue. As a few commenters have pointed out, the buckles appear a bit heavy, too heavy for this jacket to support it. But the one thing that I agree on is the placement of the sigil in the middle, which looks odd considering the asymmetrical closure of the jacket. I would take it one step further and suggest that the Gambeson shouldn't even have the sigil at all, since it's typically a foundation garment and the sigil should be on the surcoat or the armor if you want to go that way instead. The trousers, and I mean, this is an issue with all medieval-inspired fantasy, including Game of Thrones, is that they are always going to look contemporary because men wouldn't have worn pants. They would have worn hose. Finally, let's talk about young Rhaenyra's gown. The one thing we don't have here is context, so I am just commenting on the costume itself. I have no idea how the flashback scenes will work or what it will look like with color grading or what her arc is in the story just from looking at these pictures. What I can tell you is that, as I have mentioned before, and many of the comments have said the same thing, that her dress looks like something you would see at a Renaissance fair. As Asen pointed out to me, the dress is cut with princess seams. This is something you will often see in bridal, prom dresses, and even McCall costume patterns because it is a simple pattern and looks good on many figures. But in this world, it just doesn't fly. My feeling is that the costume designer Jany Temime just doesn't have a good understanding of the assignment. Costume designer Michelle Clapton, on the other hand, who built the world of Game of Thrones for 8 seasons, had an eye for both cut and tailoring, but she also had an incredible team of cutters that were adventurous and experimental, often developing the cut directly on the dressmaker's dummy. That's why she has 6 Emmys. The dress fabric doesn't help matters. I don't know what it is. It's possibly a brocade from Top Fabrica Soho. They have provided some of the fabrics in the show so far. Like her wig, it looks synthetic and cheap. If it had been built on a foundation to give it some gravitas, or if she was wearing some kind of foundation garment, it might have looked better. Just as an example, the back of the gown is laced, but it's puckering under the weight of the lacing because there is no understructure or boning in the bodice. And then except for the gold chain belt, which, like I said earlier, the jewelry I appreciate, there is no decoration on the gown at all. No lace, trim, appliques, embroidery, fringe, beading, fur, or any other number of embellishments that we might expect to see in someone that is highborn. If you recall, Michelle Clapton had on her team the incredible Michelle Carragher, who would add subtle touches to the costumes to outright full-on badass embellishments like we saw in Dany's Dragonscale textures. Now, if you feel that I have been unduly harsh, feel free to yell at me in the comments. Or if you agree with my analysis, let me know too. The good news is the glimpse that I have had of some of the armor is that it looks very promising. At any rate, if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing if you already haven't. I will have more House of the Dragon content coming your way soon. Thank you for spending time with me. I will see you in the next video.